We've all struggled with those moments where our child is losing it, and meanwhile we're telling ourselves, don't yell, stay calm, don't yell. And we're trying to force the calm voice. And meanwhile, we can feel the heat rising up in our body, the chest clenching, and we feel like we're just barely holding it all in. And I'm here to tell you what no one talks about, which is that in those moments, it's not about regulation, as we call it. It's actually about working with the nervous system and with your nervous response. I'm not saying that we yell. I'm saying that it's got to go somewhere. And on top of that, the goal is not to not yell. That's the wrong goal. The goal is to understand what's coming up for us and to work with it to flow through. And when we start thinking about things in a completely different way, that is when things start to change. Because here's the thing that no one talks about with gentle parenting, and the reason so many parents try it and they get frustrated, it's because gentle parenting and the way that it has started to take root is this idea that we always have to be patient, we always have to be kind, we always have to be loving, we always have to be gentle. And yet gentle does not always work. And when we do it that way, what that is I've got another word for that. And the other word is called suppression. And when we suppress all these things that we're feeling naturally inside, what we're creating is actually a pressure cooker. It's compression. And things that are compressed like a spring or like a pressure cooker, there's always a rebound. It's got to go somewhere. And the reason so many parents struggle with gentle parenting and the values that it espouses around not yelling, suppressing, always being gentle and all that is there's actually so much judgment that's built in that if we're not able to deliver on those things, then it must mean that we failed. But I'm here to tell you, you're not failing. It's just not how we were designed as humans, as people, as parents. And there's a different way. The reason you're yelling is different from what you think. It's not because you're not able to control it or regulate it. It's actually the contrary. It's because it gets suppressed and then it all comes out later at a point when you can't control it or contain it anymore. What happens when we start to work with our nervous system rather than against it? When we start suppressing, when we're ignoring, when we start to even dissociate, we're working against our nervous system and the way that we're naturally designed. But when we work with our nervous system and start flowing with it, everything starts to shift. Because then we're allowed to be human. Then we stop judging ourselves for being human and having very human, natural, normal responses to things. And as parents, that's what we need. The reason I understand this so well is because I lived it. I wanted to be the gentle mom, the loving mom, the patient mom, the not yelling mom. And yet, the more I suppressed, the worse I felt. And even when I wasn't yelling, I still didn't feel good because I felt like there's a piece of me that was missing. And that's the byproduct of what happens when we start to suppress and work against our own system and against what is already there within us. And what I found is that nothing worked until I started to work with my nervous system. And I developed a framework that helps parents go through this, and I'm going to share this with you. I call it my connection keys. And it's a really simple framework that took me from feeling guilty about yelling, guilty about not being enough as a mom, to feeling really, really anchored in who I am and being able to advocate for myself while honoring the needs of my children at the same time. And it's the same method that's helped clients of mine go through the same thing, where they move from feeling guilty and disconnected with their children towards feeling really secure and building bonds that really last over a long time and having the confidence of knowing that they're the best parent that they can possibly be. So today I'm going to be sharing my system and how I do this. And the first part of it is emotional safety. And I know that that is like a big word and that it shows up in a lot of the things that we talk about sometimes, and no one actually thinks about it, even though we talk a lot about it. And what I mean by emotional safety in this context is actually emotional safety for you. Understanding what you need and what's happening in the moment and releasing yourself from the judgment and the pressure of being perfect. What does that look like for you? What does emotional safety look like for you in being you with you? And the reason this is important is because Unless you can be really present and release yourself from the judgment, you can't create emotional safety for another person if you don't have it for yourself. And so that is why it's so important to create the emotional safety for ourselves, first and foremost. And then as we move through that, then we move into the second part of my paradigm and framework, which is how we find our steady. How do we find our center? Feeling grounded, feeling whole, feeling connected. Even in the situations when we might feel activated, when we might feel stressed, where we feel like yelling and pushing back, and that's okay. But what do we choose in the moment that when we get back to how we feel centered, we start to bring in a lot of choice. So even in the moment where we feel really activated, when we do this work, we come back to our center and we start to take a pause and to understand choice. What do I choose to do? And how do I find my steadiness in the midst of everything that's going on? And so the objective no longer is I am not going to yell. I'm avoiding the yelling. And as that saying goes, what we resist persists. Instead, the objective is what feels safe for me? What is my center? What is my groundedness? And how do I create that steadiness for myself? And very naturally, what ends up happening and what's powerful about this is that you won't yell because you don't need to. Because you're going to find that steadiness and you're going to give yourself that safety, and you're not going to be as activated or acting on the activations and the stress response that is there for you, because you start working with your nervous system. And then the last part of my framework is something that I call redefining resilience, and how we do that for ourselves, but on a body level. Because the world at large defines resilience as what I call stoic resilience. We are resilient and defined by how much we can withstand under pressure without breaking. But I'd like to introduce a different definition for resilience, which is that we can titrate and understand what we're up against and decide for ourselves how quickly we come back to our center, how quickly we come back to ourselves and our strength, and then we turn around and confront adversity and what's going on for us. And when we redefine resilience in this way, and I have a lot of practices that help support people in how to get there, and we start to reframe and decondition what is existing in our body and start reconditioning towards that steadiness, the center, and the real definition of resilience, which I call the embodied resilience, where we get to choose for ourselves what we want to do, how much we want to do, and titrate how much of the adversity and how much of that stress we want to take on, and understand how much capacity we have to take that on for us and our children, everything starts to shift. And so the question no longer becomes, why am I yelling? The question then changes and becomes, who am I being and who do I want to be right now? And what do I want to choose for myself and my children right now? And recognizing that there are moments where I feel high stress, and there are moments where I'm feeling activated. And this is really stressful because I feel threatened. I actually feel threatened. My nervous system feels threatened. But what am I going to do about that? And when we start to work through that and work with our nervous system, everything starts to shift. So imagine for a moment, the moment that used to make you feel like you needed to yell, now all of a sudden feels calm, steady, and you're able to get a bit of perspective from it, and you're observing it, and it goes silent. And instead of yelling, you're saying what you need, what comes up for you, what you want as a response, a boundary with your child, a boundary for yourself. And your voice feels steady, and your child feels safe with you, and you, most importantly, feel safe with yourself. And that's the change, that's the transformation. And that is how you change your emotional legacy and what you're passing on to your children into the future. Because in those moments, what you're modeling is what it looks like to have an emotional response, but to choose differently, to choose how to communicate, to choose how you want to interact with your child, and to choose you, that you honor yourself, and that you're stating what you need, what you want, or what's coming up for you in a way that it's not activating or yelling. So if you want to go deeper, I have a workshop coming up. I have an in-person workshop coming up in January and an online workshop coming up in February, where I'm going to be talking about these concepts and how we start to bring into life with some of the practices and the somatics that helps to support us from a mind-body perspective. So it's not just about mindset and trying to tell ourselves what we need to be doing. I don't want to yell. We're starting to work with your mind and body together to start working with your nervous system in the way that you were always designed, rather than against it, rather than trying to resist it, and rather than trying to suppress it. No more suppression. Doesn't need to be that way. You're allowed to feel what you feel, and those feelings are not bad. They are signals that demonstrate that there's something that you need and that there's something there trying to protect you. What is it trying to protect you from? So if you're interested in my workshop to take this to the next level, you can sign up in the link in my bio. See you soon.